to another episode of Craft Conversations. We're here today with Jennifer Walsh. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I started to become very interested in stained glass around mid-80s. I liked how the light changes the color of glass. Yeah. And there were a lot of courses being offered at that time. And I was living in Ontario. And there was a school near where I was living offering fall evening classes. So I decided to sign up for one just to be curious. Curious caused me to figure out how do you make a stained glass panel. That was, I think that was in 1986. And then from there I took another one, and then since then I've been just having fun with glass.
You learned in Ontario first, and then you moved here, and then did you start doing like stained glass more when you moved here, or was it more like you started in Ontario and then kind of continued here, or how did that work?
I practiced in Ontario for a little while, and then I got married, and my husband and I moved to Halifax. In Halifax, I started creating some designs. There was a present I made for my father. I saw this hot air balloon poster, and I thought, oh, that would be cool in glass. Yeah. So I bought the poster and just kind of copied the poster. And in our two-bedroom apartment, I started cutting glass on our kitchen table, and it was just like, I'm going to make this happen. I created quite a large panel for my father for his 50th birthday. Then I made another one when we moved into Halifax. And then we left Halifax and moved to St. John's in 91. I was doing a little bit of stained glass, but that's when I became a stay-at-home mom of 3. So I couldn't really cut glass. But I continued on being creative by creating quilts. While being at home with 3 children, I would bring my sewing machine up on the counter of the kitchen countertop and just make kind of like crazy quilts. And then at some point, after making many quilts for the children, it's just like, I can't do this anymore. The sound of the sewing machine was like really bothering me. But almost at that same time, I discovered quilt patterns would be brilliant in glass. Yeah. It was just like the light struck me.
Yeah. Do you want to speak to like why is it such an easy, I guess, transition to making that quilt pattern to that stained glass?
Well, it's the lines. Block quilt designs, especially. I draw them like so that there's 2 and 2, so it makes about like 11 by 11. When I look at the lines and I repeat it or I swing it the opposite way, then I just look at all the lines that I can play with color. And there's so many different combinations.
Starting the beginner stained glass class then, and then kind of going from there, like I think I saw you studied with different people. Like, was that like an apprenticeship? Was that, how did that work?
Yes, during the time of the 90s, the late Graham Howcroft, he used to be a stained glass artist here. He saw some of my panels hanging at the Duckworth Bistro at the time. He saw them inside because I had them displayed in their restaurant, and he called me up and asked me if I would be interested in being his cutter, and then slowly start working more involved with cementing these massive church windows that he had. It was a really cool studio because there was another stained glass artist there, Peter Brecken, and he did a lot of the painting on the glass, and using the kiln he would fabricate it with the lead cane. I was more into the cutting, and there was a huge easel in this studio that you could put all your pieces of glass up on this huge easel so that you would remove the design behind it, and then you can really see it and critique it. And I actually still use that technique by using my light table and taking a photo of the glass that's cut, using this as my easel and bringing it on top of my light table, taking a photo of it, and then I look at the photo on my phone, and then I'm critiquing it. Because it looks very different while looking down upon it. You need it actually to be like right in front of you. And you still fully don't know what it's going to look like until you've hung it. Yeah, with the light. And we could have a real sunny day, and then we can have a really gray day. I like gray days with glass.
Interesting.
The best. Yeah. It has more of a mood to it. When the sun is going right through the stained glass panel, it's almost too glary.
I'm looking at what we have set out here, kind of on this table here.
Yeah, we've got the teal, but this is a fun textured clear.
It's the
textured teal color, and it adds sparkle. So I end up trying to, again, the water glass. See, these ones also cause a lot of the sparkle, which I like to bring in a lot of texture into the panels, depending on the light or lack of light for the, and then of course the wispy white is something that I use for some of the fish. This is a panel that I just received the other day in the mail. So as you see, sometimes it's not the same. So I have to adapt in my head. You can see through this side, but you can't see through that side. So then I have to also play in my head of what goes next to, say, this one and that one when I'm cutting the fish. I also bring in textured clears to add sparkle, and iridescent glass, which is fun too. In the fish design, this one in particular is called Trying to Fit. And then I have dark turquoise, medium teal, and then the aqua. And then I kind of repeat it. Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of that like rippliness to it?
Yes. The panel behind you, that's another fish design. So if you notice, the gray is a water glass. So I purposely made the water glass flat right underneath the dory. And then when the fish are like quickly being removed or dumped overboard, I purposely made the water glass to be all in all sorts of different direction. That design there, I thought of about 2 years ago, imagining that emotion of let it go, unburdening yourself. All the fish designs are related to human behavior or emotion, and I try to demonstrate that through schools of fish. I had been doing, again, Graham Howcroft. I was doing a lot of religious panels and stuff, and there was one design that he was doing with fish, but it was just fish. And then I was like, years later, it's a funny story, but I was walking my dog and I saw a puddle, and I dropped a pebble in the middle of the puddle, and then I saw the rings, and then I immediately thought of fish, and then I thought of the ripple effect. It was good timing because that's what was happening in my life with family members. There was a ripple effect being caused among the family members because there was a change going on. So that's how that story of scatter came about. I saw it in a puddle. And then I started thinking of schools of fish. Like, for example, the fish design that is in a net. That one is called caught. That's when I was feeling caught, not knowing what to do, and also figuring out how to come to a solution. So I thought using that as a representation of an emotion that many of us feel. You're caught. And then there's 14 other designs, so of the fish designs. So the quilt designs, say for a crazy love, which has multitude of colors in it, I just kind of like watch how the colors are playing with each other. And then I swing the design around and get a different angle at it. I never know what it's going to look like until it's up in the window.
Yeah, like you started with like making pieces to go into windows.
Free hanging.
Yeah. So how did that process then, going from like putting pieces in windows and I guess making them to fit a window and then moving to like more pieces like this?
The fitted windows were through Graham Howcroft, but my own panels have always been free hanging. So that they can hang from inside of the window frame, or it can be moved from window to window. When I was coming up with this idea, I was watching people with glass. Some of them are quite afraid of it, and it is kind of scary to manage the sizes of panels. So I wanted to make sure that the sizes that I would create were not scary, and one person would be able to hang it themselves. If I do commission pieces, we discuss how are you going to install it other than me.
Yes, so you don't have to be there to go install it.
No, I'm not a carpenter.
No. When you're choosing to make the free hanging panels like this, what is it that really drew you to that, other than, like I know you mentioned it's easier, less intimidating for people to hang, but is there like a processing that you drew you to that too?
No, and it was also the business of trying to figuring out how to frame these panels. I went through a number of different stages of actual metal frames, wooden frames, and then when I was working at Graham Howcroft Studio, he was framing his huge panels with a 3/4 inch flat lead for the framing. and then the light went off, and I thought, oh, I could use a 1/2 inch flat H lead cane for my framing. That is lead that's completely around these panels.
And this, I'm assuming, is it soldered on then? Is
Yeah.
that how you attach it?
Yes, and the wires I create as well, that I have to solder the wires on, and then I attach the chain.
You mentioned like doing commission work. Do you want to talk a little bit about like what commission work does for you?
I like to talk to the person who is asking what are they envisioning. Sometimes verbal is not enough. I don't like to have miscommunication. When it comes to, say, a commission piece that I have not drawn, it's something that they're wanting me to do. I now ask them to send me a picture, 3 or 4 pictures of what they're looking for, especially in landscape. Landscape is not my go-to.
Do you mean like landscape orientation, like portrait landscape, or do you mean like landscapes?
Landscapes with using glass, yes. So I try very hard to get it as close as possible. I end up doing a drawing and then have the person come in, and then we discuss colors. And that's why I have pieces of glass over there on my in my studio, so that we can even play with colors. You know, some people want a panel created for them that I've already done a design of, say a play design, which is the circles, and that they want one done. So I ask them, so what are your favorite colors? And that maybe they need a little bit of play time to loosen them up, and then I can start playing around with the colors as well.
So people think about their favorite colors, but do you find people are very practiced in thinking about like light, especially as light goes through glass?
No, I asked that question. One of the designs that I have just finished, a commission piece, it was a panel that I call Follow the Leader, and it's a fish, and it's going up above their front door. So I wanted to know where's the sun, so that I can use light colors more or darker colors less.
Like, you know, the process is so important, but people don't often get to see the process. Like, they see the finished objects, but you see the process. Like, how does, I guess, being able to be here in the studios, does that allow you to kind of share some of the process, and it's not just the finished, but it's...
Oh, with people who are looking at my... Yes. Yes, and that's actually why I have photos in my studio to show some of the process. I like to try to document, as I used to be an early childhood educator, and I used to love taking photos of children in play so that their parents can see and we could show, you know. But yeah, so that way people can say, oh, so what are you doing in that photo? And then I can expand. Or I can say, well, I don't have enough wall space to show you everything, but I can verbally tell you.
Yeah, or you can
watch.
Show.
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah, sometimes people walk by and I'm very much involved in what I'm doing and I don't know that they're there. And then all of a sudden there's a bit of movement and I look up and they say, oh, sorry. It's like, no, that's fine, that's fine. Because it is interesting, especially little ones. That's why I have pieces of glass on my table. People want to touch and feel and look. And it's like, that's why I encourage it. Because I haven't got anything sharp there. But then, you know, you start feeling them, you know, feeling glass.
What would you recommend to beginner stained glass makers?
Practice, practice, practice. Don't give up. When you're cutting, especially, make sure that you use cutting oil. And you can tell if you need cutting oil because the sound of the cut when you're scoring, if the sound of the score is like really, really kind of like, then you need to put a little bit of cutting oil on the tip of your, with the rotating wheel. Also, with using cutting oil, it makes the cutting, the cracking of the glass quicker and easier. If you don't use the oil, it could cause splintering of the cut, and then you'll have to do it again. Sometimes I feel that it shouldn't always be product driven at the beginning. It should be the fun of discovering how you can cut. So you might want to consider not using expensive glass at first. So if you want to try and create something, see if you can use textured clear first. And the more you practice, the better you're going to get. Don't rush it, because the process of creating, say, anything with glass, it takes a while. Also, read yourself. If you're feeling frustrated and annoyed that it's not working out, you got to walk away. And recognize that. And it's okay, because I have many times like, oh, I have to, and it's like, okay, walk away, Yeah.
I feel like it's a very transferable thing too, because I've
Yeah.
definitely like, especially in those early years of like trying different things, like getting that,
Yes.
that you're like, oh, I have to fix this now.
Yeah.
And you don't have to fix it now.
No.
You don't.
And it's supposed to be fun.
It is
That's
supposed to be
that,
fun.
that's the key of creative. It's supposed to be fun, and you're supposed to, quote to me, play. It's playtime, you know, because play is ageless.
So how do you keep safe when you're making stained glass?
The cutting business, whenever I snap my piece of glass that I have just scored using one of, this is my cutter, I push it along and then I snap the pieces. Sometimes there are some little bits of glass that is sticking out on the outer edge, and I use a grinder and I just grind it off just to nick it off, and then shouldn't cut my hands. And I have been handling glass, I guess, for such a long time. I'm going to cut this aqua color glass, and I'm putting some cutting oil onto my cutter. I'm going to be using needing to use a straight line, so this has a bit of an edge here which keeps the ruler from moving around. So I line up my cutter down here. This piece of glass is what I'm going to cut right there. I keep my pieces of glass on top of the design actually while I'm cutting, so that I can see what's going on. And when it's all cut, I end up putting it onto a piece of plastic and moving it on top of the light table to see what it actually looks like. Oh, I love the sound of the cutter. It actually reminds me of happy memories of skating on the Ottawa Canal.
Oh.
The blade hitting the ice.
Yeah.
You know, and the score, and even the cracking. Like there's a technique of cracking, like you can slightly crack it at one end, turn it around, slightly crack it again, and you can see it slightly moving, and then you can crack it fully. And then even using these glass cutters, you can just gently squeeze the glass right where the score line is. You have to be really careful with the breaking.
Yeah.
There is a technique, and also there's certain ways to cut in the way of knowing a piece. I guess I'm just instinctively knowing of the process of what to cut first and what to break first, because some cuts are tricky.
And it's so funny too. I mean, like I think at one point I was doing something with stained glass, and someone was like, because they were talking about like, you know, if the piece is too thin, it's too brittle. I'm like, but how do you know if it's too brittle? Like, or it's too thin rather. And they're like, oh, you can feel it.
Oh.
And it's just such a like,
Yeah.
knowing, getting to that point where you can feel like, oh, that's just a little bit too brittle.
And when you draw your own designs, you have to be very aware of that, because if the lines are really, really close together and you're soldering them, they will crack. The heat of the lead, and if you solder it again right underneath, the glass, it will expand and then it'll shrink and it'll crack. So you have to be very aware of what lines to actually solder and let that cool, and then go back and touch up a little bit here and there if you have to have like a little narrow lines. I moved in here January 2021. I had it a different way at first, and it just wasn't working. So I asked our manager, Melissa. I wanted to be more out there for people to see me cutting and how I was set up. So this is working now. I put all little pieces of glass here, so that if I have a commission piece, or even when I'm creating a panel, I might think, oh, I'm just going to get some random colors and just see what it looks like on the design that I'm working on. So it's that's very functional, and that was just recently. I usually try to get away once a year and physically go choose glass. And it is such a thrill.
It must be so different to be there in person and to do it, right? Like, or bring a fabric. Seeing a fabric in person is not the same as seeing a fabric online. It's so different.
Yes.
Yeah, and clearly, like, seeing a glass online is so different from seeing a glass in person.
And taking a photo of glass is extremely challenging. Like, so sometimes when I get my box from Canada Post and I'm all excited and I look inside and it's like, that's not what I thought it was going to be like.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's okay. I learn. But when I go to the place say if it's in Ottawa or Nova Scotia or in Montreal, it's such a thrill. I
Yeah.
see so much possibilities with, you know, pulling out a piece of glass, and it's like, and sometimes I bring my daughter, Hillary, and it's like, Mom, look at this, look at that. And she and I get so excited together. It's like, I drop a few dollars. When I do come up with an idea in my head, it always comes in my head first, and then I start playing around with it, and I usually have it pretty well figured out before I start drawing it, and I redraw and draw. Then when I do have the drawing done, I end up kind of like a paint by number set. You know, I number all the pieces that I've cut, and I've got a color code, so that when I do it again, if I haven't redrawn it, then I can look back and make sure that I don't copy it. Everyone can be reassured that they have a one of a kind.
Yeah, so you make sure that, you know, none of the color combinations have been repeated, even if it is the case, like even, you know, even if you use the same pattern, there are always different colors, or always different textures, or always,
oh, definitely.
And why is that so important to you?
It's an original, and it's special. You know, they're all special. I get very attached to the process of creating. It's not the product at the end for me, it's the process. And I think that that's what I think crafters, artists, creators, whatever you want to call us, keep that in mind as the philosophy. Then your mind is always open to changes during your creations, so that you can keep expanding on your art.